All right, so we're going to continue to let our guests come in, but thanks everyone again for spending some time with us on your Monday. We feel it's 45 minutes well spent of advice from some of the smartest people in the industry. To be honest with you, that's what ODI is very proud of. One day immersion. I'm Dolly Wolf, the founder and president of One Day Immersion. It's been my great pleasure to provide this conference for you, and we are gearing up for 2020 in a very different way. But we're looking forward to that new kind of creativity and different format. And also, we wanted to launch this online series to keep in touch with you, to keep you in front of our guest speakers, to let you know what's going on in their world and within their organizations. And you know what? They want to know what's going on in your world. And, all of our folks that join us come with a mentoring heart. It's kind of mandatory. So we thank you for your time. Our guest speaker is very dear to me. It's Leerone Anolik with Google. Leerone is Strategy and Operations Manager for Global Business Development. And I'll try to tell a quick story, but I first met Leerone when she was at Columbia Business School. And I hosted an event there with the guest speaker. And she was my main contact. She was, I believe, president at the time of the Columbia Media and Entertainment Club. And sometimes when you come across someone and you just kind of have an instant connection, you just kind of think, you know what, I'm going to watch that person. I'm going to keep my eye on that person. And I'm so glad I did, because from that first engagement, and the way that she just presented herself, the way that she handled the event, the way I could feel like she really was committed to it and really wanted to do the best job and present the best event, it stuck with me. So I followed her and we stayed in touch, like through LinkedIn. And when I launched One Day Immersion in 2013, I asked Leerone to help me. Just because I knew she had this incredible background. She was always so thoughtful and strategic, but what about this? She kind of always challenges you, and still does to this day. I'm also very proud that 7 years later, after this relationship and One Day Immersion becoming a 501c last year, that we asked her to join our board. So she is an official board of director for the organization. So she is integral in helping develop what we do and our outreach. And she jumped at the chance and the opportunity to share her story and insight about her path, and is open to your questions. So make sure you get them ready. And so I want everyone to please welcome our guest speaker, Leerone Anolik.
Thanks, Dolly. I love that. I'm like almost with tears in my eyes listening you talk about that. And I love the yes, but, because I feel like that is such a precise sort of way to describe the way that I think. And something that my husband hates. And so I'm going to have to tell him that story and how sometimes a yes, but is a positive thing. So a couple of disclaimers, just up front. I have 2 small kids that are not at home right now, but at some point they'll come back. And so if there's noise or someone opens the door, I'm sorry about that. That is just the world that we all live in today. There are many, many, many distractions for all of us, and we're all at home, and it is challenging for sure. And then the second disclaimer is that I work at Google, but everything that I say on this call is just my personal opinion. So, I'm not representing Google at any way. Just something I have to say. And third disclaimer, Dolly already mentioned, is I'm a very proud member of ODI, and I love that you're all here, and please continue to engage with us, give us feedback, attend the events that are of interest of you. If they're not of interest of you, then let us know why. And we look forward to also seeing all of you in November at our flagship event. So I guess I'll start with just telling you a little bit about my career, how I ended up at Google. I can talk a little bit about what I do today as well. Please feel free to interrupt with questions, either just live, shout it out, which is a little bit difficult on video. So there's also the chat functionality, so you can feel free to type throughout, and Dolly or I will catch it. So I grew up in Israel. I moved to the US in 2011, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But basically, like all or 99% of Israelis, I started my career in the military. After high school, I was an intelligence researcher, became an officer, and it was very much work that was very much analytical driven, a lot of sort of problem solving, working at a very fast-paced environment, right? In the military, you sort of have to be always responsive, and so those are probably things that have stayed, and potentially you'll notice throughout this, like my career and this story. After I left the Army, I went to university and got my bachelor's degree in mathematics, psychology, and economics, mostly because I did not know what I wanted to do. I like numbers. I was more of an analytical person, so I felt having that degree will allow me to then figure out what I wanted to do with my life. At the same time, I also worked for the Prime Minister's office in Israel, doing similar intelligence work, so continuing sort of in that space of government service and analytics. And when I graduated, I had sort of this decision of, do I want to stay in sort of the public and government route, or do I want to do something in the private sector? And I felt like I didn't know enough about the world. And so at that point, it was probably good for me to try something else. And I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And there aren't really a lot of jobs out there that just require a bachelor's in math. Like, that's super vague. So I just applied to a bunch of different things in a bunch of different industries, and was really intrigued by this job that I saw at a media agency. And so I ended up working there. It was one of the top media agencies in Israel, called Israel at the time. And so, and the role was doing media planning and buying, specifically for TV. And what that means is that an advertiser creates a campaign, right? Usually with their ad agency, but then someone needs to actually decide, where does that campaign go? How do you reach your target audiences, right? How much of it should be in print and digital and radio and TV, and within TV, like what shows and channels should it be on? And so that was my role in that. So again, it was working with numbers, right? There's a budget and there's ratings that we want to hit, and there's a specific audience. And so it's figuring out, how do I do that within the constraints of the budget that I have? It was planning and sort of being strategic about, how do I spend my client's budget, what's upcoming during the year, what key events or major holidays happen in Israel that I should be thinking about with my client. And so still within sort of that data world, I ended up doing it for about 3 years, really loved it because it was fast-paced, and it was in an industry that was creative and fun. And so while I wasn't necessarily the person creating the ads, it was just fun to be around that, and super exciting when you have an advertiser that's launching like a really big campaign that's important to them. But what I didn't really like about it was the client management aspect of it. And the more that I stayed in that role, I realized that in order for me to sort of move up, it was more and more client management and more sort of sales type of role, where I would have to convince the clients to spend more money. And that was less appealing to me. And so after 3 years, again, I sort of got to this point where I'm not exactly sure what the next move is. And so I thought it was a good time to go to business school, get a business education that I felt that I lacked a little bit with my math undergrad. And so I also knew that I wanted to stay within the media world, just not in advertising, and business school would allow me to explore that. Obviously, it was also the point in time where I moved to the US. And so it was an opportunity to find myself in a much bigger industry and a much larger market with a lot more opportunities. And so I moved to New York in 2011. I spent really those 2 years really focused on doing anything possible to learn about the media industry, to build my network in the media industry. And so Dolly mentioned the media club. I was co-president of the Media Management Association at Columbia. I did a couple of internships at different companies to understand what types of roles exist in media, what do I like, what do I don't like, network, build up my resume and show that I have these company names and brands that are familiar. I networked a ton. So I basically emailed or reached out to usually through the alumni network because it's a lot easier, but I just basically reached out to anyone that worked in a media company that was Columbia alum and said, would you talk to me or meet me? And usually they agreed. And so just really focus on just expanding my network, building up my experience, and figuring out what I want to do post-business school. When I graduated in 2013, what I really wanted to do was go work in the TV or video space. I really wanted to work on the publisher side after coming from advertiser. It was hard to figure out exactly sort of the right role that would match my skill set. I knew that I wanted, again, analytics, problem solving, thinking strategically, but it was hard to take those skills and match them to titles, right? And so if you look at job titles or job descriptions, a lot of time they're very vague. And so what I did was, again, going back to alums that I met earlier, networking, was to go back to alums in specific companies and ask them, what does this role actually mean? Or this is what I like to do. What does it sound like in your company? And through those conversations, I realized that I probably couldn't stay so focused just on video and TV. I probably should expand a little within media, given that I had sort of a timeline where I wanted to find a job, and also realized that I should pay probably a little bit more attention to not just the titles, but what is actually written in the job description. And so that's how I actually then ended up working for iHeartMedia, which is obviously not a TV company, it's a music company, the largest radio company in the US. And so the role there was doing revenue strategy and analytics. Again, a title that I probably would have, before those conversations with alumni, I probably would have just looked at that title and said, nope, that sounds like finance. I hate finance. I did not take any finance classes. That's not for me. But talking to one alum specifically who worked for finance at NBC, he said, there are many roles within finance that are not just about core P&L work. And they might fit what you want to do and what you're describing to me. And so you should be looking at them. And so that role was a role that I applied after I talked to that specific person about that. And it was indeed not a finance role at all. So revenue strategy and analytics is, in a nutshell, is sort of trying to figure out, together with the sales department, how do we best sell our advertising assets to advertisers? What price do we sell it at? And how much of it do we sell? So that's the inventory, in order to get the most money, the most revenue, right? Sort of optimize our revenue. Because there's a fixed amount of ad minutes that you can sell, right? And so I worked mostly on the digital side. There was very little at the time at iHeart in terms of reporting and analytics on the digital side. And so I had this opportunity to really build something from the ground up, which was pretty cool. I came in, realized that there were all of these databases, but I needed to learn to actually write SQL to do that. And so I learned that on the job with help from colleagues. I was able to then figure out what data do we have, what would that look like for the sales team, what sort of reports and tools would they need, and what sort of systems would they need in place. And through that, I also developed a really close relationship with the president of digital sales there and really became his go-to person for any planning or any question that he had. And so if we had to plan next year and how would that look in terms of the budget that we would sign up for, who will sell it, I was his person to help him figure that out. I did that for 3 years. I built a team, hired a couple of people. It became less exciting because it wasn't as much about building things. It was more about doing the same thing over and over again and really managing the digital business. And so at that point, I decided that I wanted to do something else. I had an opportunity to stay within iHeart, but move to a different role, focusing more on product strategy, both for radio and digital, and specifically figuring out what types of services we could offer advertisers to help them understand what advertising with iHeart does for their, let's say, sales, right? Because that's what all advertisers at the end of the day want. And so how could we possibly show them what a radio campaign did for people coming into their stores? And that is not a simple problem to solve at all. And so I spent 2 years talking to companies that have all sorts of data and offer all sorts of tools to figure out if we could do something for radio. Would it scale? Because iHeart is a huge company with thousands of sellers across the company. How would that look? It was really interesting because it was now more ideation and brainstorming and sort of talking to people outside the company versus the previous role, which was a lot more internal. And then sort of, again, after 2 years, there wasn't a lot of traction or progress, and I started getting bored again. I was also at a point where I'm almost at iHeart 6 years. I never thought I would stay this long. Maybe it's time to see something else. And I had this role at Google came up, and so I decided to try. I interviewed and got in and started at Google about 1.5 years ago. And so at Google, what I do is strategy and operations, which is very much it's very similar to internal consulting for those of you that know sort of the consulting industry, like the McKinsey's, BCG's of the world. It's a very similar function, but in-house, as well as sort of a chief of staff functionality where I work with a specific team and their leadership, and I help them manage their day-to-day business. And so that's really anything that they need to help the team run. And it's a team of about 200 people. That team specifically is a team that does BD or partnerships, and I can go into that, what that actually means more if there's interest. But that is a team that does partnerships for 5 different product areas at Google. So I get to touch now not just media. One of those verticals is ads, so Google Ads, which is sort of where I come from, right? I grew up in advertising and media. And so that makes sense, but the other products are completely not related to ads or media. And so now I sort of get this purview into a lot more industries, a lot more partners, and a lot more ideas, which is pretty cool. I'll stop there because I've been talking a lot. And so would love to, get some questions from you or things that you'd be more interested to dig into.
I have a question, Leerone.
Sure. Before you just ask your question, can you say your name and
absolutely.
From?
Sure thing. My name is Utkarsh, and I recently finished my master's in media management from Fordham University. And thank you for doing the session for us. Really informative. And my question for you is, can you explain a little bit about BD, business development and partnerships, because I'm trying to get into ad sales and business developments and client relationships for advertising agency. And so if you could explain the job description a little bit more, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, would love to. And so BD means different things in different companies. It's very much a buzzword, or at least was a buzzword when I was in business school. Like everyone wanted to do BD. And it could mean anything from pure sales, right? So you'll see a lot of companies that just define it as sales, to more of what it's like at Google, where it's not a simple sale, where there is a very simple transaction of you give me money, I give you a product. It's more, there's a long-term relationship, and usually something that benefits both sides. It's not always monetary, like there's not always a payment that exchanged hands. It's sometimes more complex in what you want to do. So sometimes both partners will need to figure out how to build something together, or take something from one company and adapt it to the other. Like it could be it could really mean tons of different things. And so to give you an example of what it looks like for the team that I work with at Google, as I said, it covers a couple of the team that I work with a lot of different products. One of them, for example, is food ordering, right? And so Google has, it's fairly new, so you might not have noticed, but if you search for a restaurant, for some restaurants, you will be able to order food online directly without going to Seamless or the restaurant website directly, right? You could just be able to do it on Google, similar to how you can book a flight on Google. And so that requires a partnership, either with a restaurant or someone representing the restaurant or some third party that works with the restaurant, to allow us to show that information and then create all of the infrastructure that allows us to capture the information of the order and get it to the restaurant in order for them to make that delivery. Similar with Google Travel, which is another product that this team supports, for you to be able to book a flight on Google directly without going to a Delta or Expedia, or that requires a partnership as well with the airline directly for us to be able to show that information, right? And then complete that entire process. And so there isn't the simple, like, you give me money, I give you something. It's more complex than that. A third partnership that I'll mention that is more relevant to the advertising world, for example, right, is Nielsen. So Nielsen, probably heard of Nielsen ratings, right? Nielsen is the media currency in the US as well as in other countries for measuring TV ratings. It's the dominant currency. Google wants YouTube, right, to be able to be measured similar to TV. And so advertisers have sort of a comparable information. And when they buy TV and buy YouTube, they can compare the two, right? So we need to work with Nielsen, being a dominant player in the market, to figure out how can Nielsen measure YouTube in a way that makes an apples to apples comparison with TV, right? And so that's another partnership that the ads BD team will work on.
Perfect. Thank you. That really helps.
Hi, my name is Rashni. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. What do you recommend for those that are still uncertain about their career choice? How did you make the decision to change companies or roles? It's a really good question. So when I was a student, right, and to this day, I still, I've attended a lot of these talks or panels, right, and to this day, I still attend conferences or things like that, or hear execs talk. And when someone tells you about their career path, it always seems like, wow, this person, like, it all really makes sense, right? It's like these building blocks, and this person probably knew where they wanted to go. When someone, and this is not my example, this is someone that told it to me, but I think it's great. If you ever walked in a jungle, right, or really like a forest or anything, right, it's very easy to look back at the path that you created. But as you're trying to move forward, you have to pick what direction you're going at, right? And so just know that some people are indeed very planned in their career path and know exactly where they want to go and what they need to get there. Many people do not. I'm included in them. I have no shame admitting that. I think for me, it's more about recognizing the opportunities that I have in the moment and what interests me and what doesn't interest me, right? And then taking a leap of faith eventually, because you're never sure at 100%, right? Like moving from iHeart to Google, even though it's Google, was a big deal because I did not know the people that I was going to work with. I had a really good relationship with people at iHeart. I was a mom at the time, right? And just had my second kid, like all of these unknowns. And so even though Google, on paper, amazing company, from within Google, I can say the same thing, right? At the time, I didn't really know, right? And so just thinking through, what do I know about myself now? What do I not know about myself now that maybe I should, right? Like maybe you're interested in BD, but you're not sure because you've never done that. Well, now is a good opportunity to try and explore that, right? And then maybe you'll cross it off your list, right? Like I crossed client management off my list. And so as you start going down this path, you'll learn more and more about yourself and what you like and don't like and what are the opportunities out there. And I think then the choice becomes a little bit easier, right? Like 6 years ago, I had no idea that I would be working at Google. Today, it wasn't even on my radar, right? And so that's sort of how I think about it, if that helps. What was the job application process like at Google or in general? I guess I'll speak about a little bit in general and then specifically Google. So applying to jobs is hard, right? Really, really, really hard. I don't think I can sugarcoat it. I think you know better than I do at this point, right? Standing out is hard, especially, this is a difficult environment that we're in today, right? I'll acknowledge that. And so in general, I think it's about making sure that you are representing yourself as best as possible and doing everything that you know that you can to get that job, right? And so for me, for example, I knew that I wanted to be in media after business school. And so it was making sure that I had enough media resume on my background because I did. So it was doing 2 school year internships as well as a summer internship, right? That was what I needed. It's about making sure that you're networking with people and building up that network so you can ask them about specific job postings, ask them to introduce you to other people, ask them to help you understand, would you be qualified for A or B, and continuing to expand that network, right? And then making sure that you're practicing telling sort of telling your story, like who you are, what do you want to do, what are you trying to get from this person, or when you're interviewing for a job that you're really, really, really polished, right? And so that means practicing, writing down your stories, doing mock interviews with friends or parents or whoever, recording yourself, like all of that. Just make sure, because when you get that opportunity, you want to make sure that you've covered all of your basics, right? Specifically at Google, and I don't know if that was what the question specifically was about, but at Google, I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity or heard about it. It does seem pretty intimidating because Google is very, very structured about it. And when you're a candidate, they send you these really long emails with like a 2-pager sort of explanation of what you should be expecting and how you should be preparing. And I've been intimidated in the past, and I've interviewed a couple of times, and always when I got those emails, I was like, why am I interviewing for Google? Why am I doing this to myself? But sort of now going through it, being on the other end of it, it's really how you should be preparing for every interview. Google is just very structured at telling you that and sort of documenting that. But you should, like, as I said, you should do those mock interviews with people. You should write your stories down to make sure that they're fleshed out and there's some sort of structure, right? Like Google uses the STAR, but there are different frameworks out there, right? So what is the situation that I'm describing to? What is the action that I took? What is the result, right? What was the impact? Like, make sure that you're not sticking. A lot of people answer a question and tend to stick on the context, or some people will jump straight to the end without giving the context and sort of how they thought about it. And so making sure that you're prepared like that really, really helps, right? And so I would say that while Google is intimidating in how it talks about it, it really is like how you should be thinking about any job application, any interview, right? Erica, how have you dealt with financial struggles while pursuing your education or while working? Has it steered you away from any important decisions? It's a really good question. And it at the end of the day, it's a personal decision, right? And it really depends on sort of your situation. I will say that I'm lucky enough to have a US citizenship. And so that helped with the visa issues, which I know in today's climate are probably even more challenging than usual. So I will say that. I think before I went to business school, it was a process for me to come to terms with how much it costs versus what would be the impact and whether it was worth it or not. And I'm still paying student loans. Like, I graduated in 2013, right? 6 years later. I'm still sort of feeling that price. My husband and I joke that we, like, instead of buying an apartment, right, this is what we bought, my MBA. But I feel that it's, for me, right, again, for me, because this is just sort of my personal journey, for me, it really made sense. I don't think that it's necessary for everyone. There are a lot of qualified, smart people that are very successful in life that did not get an MBA. And so I really think that it's very good for a couple of things. But I think before you make any decision on that, you really need to sort of think long and hard and, even maybe put together, like, it doesn't have to be a model, but like something with numbers where you put down, right, like, this is how much it's going to cost. This is like how much I think I will need. These are the loans that I could get. This is what I expect my income to be, and figure out if that's something that you're in for or not. Kate F. Kate, a sophomore at Pace University, majoring in business economics, studied economics. So I have to say that I did study economics, but it was mathematics with extended units and economics and psychology. So it wasn't the full bachelor's economics degree. I don't know if I don't have a moment where I'm like, oh, I learned this in class, right? I think that's true to MBA as well. And so I think it's probably at this point either sort of woven to just the way that I think about things, right? It's just being knowledgeable about the fact that there's this like whole practice that exists, right? But there isn't necessarily a specific technique or a specific subject in economics that I apply day to day. Not to say that I don't think it was useful. It was for me. But the work that I do today is definitely not economics work.
Hi, everybody. I really appreciate you and everything you've done. I'm actually not familiar with this organization, so I kind of have a twofold question. My first one is, how did you get involved with this organization? And I don't know if it's an East Coast thing. I'm in Los Angeles right now, so thank you for letting me be here. And my second question is, I'm a new lawyer. I'm a young lawyer. And I was curious what your experiences or what your interactions are with lawyers in your current role, or if you had that at iHeartMedia. I do film and TV work, so happy to talk with you about this whenever.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for that. Yes. So how I got involved. So I don't know if you were on when Dolly sort of talked through that story, but we met when I was a student at Columbia, and I wanted to bring a speaker, a media speaker, and Dolly knows everyone. And so at the time she was at the Cable Center, and we connected, and she helped me bring a speaker to Columbia, and we did like a Cable Center event for Columbia students, which was great. And then we stayed in touch, and it was very easy when she reached out, when she was building One Day Immersion. I just wanted to stay involved, right? Because I felt like I really used every resource that I could when I was a student. And so I felt like giving back was so easy for me. Like it's really just time, and not just, I shouldn't say just, time is a lot. But it's time, right? And so answering a student's question, or meeting someone for coffee, or connecting with someone on LinkedIn, or answering questions, like I feel like that helped me so much that I wanted to do that as well. And so ODI is a great platform to be able to do that. It's East Coast based only in the sense that we have like a flagship program in November that is usually held in person in New York City. But of course, anyone that wants to come can. This year we'll do it virtually. And so hopefully, we can reach more people, because now people don't have to fly. And it's completely free for students, right? Which is amazing. And I'm happy to talk about it more offline. In terms of your second question, yes, I do interact with legal, both in this role and at iHeart, to an extent. And so legal is really important when it comes to partnerships, right? Because all of these deals that are signed with partners have to be negotiated, and there are terms. And so all of those terms will be reviewed by lawyers, and they will help with the negotiation process in terms of understanding what can we sign up for, what are we not allowed to do, what we should be thinking about, right? That is just broader than what the BD team might know of, right? And so at Google specifically, every product has its own legal team, and they are product experts, but then also interact with partnerships and sales teams and other teams to help with any legal questions or issues that come up. At iHeart, it was, I think, same thing. The interaction was mostly around partnerships. So yes, there's definitely interaction with legal.
Hi, it's Utkarsh again. I have one more question, if you don't mind answering.
Sure.
Okay, so, perfect. So while you were answering Roshni's question, you said you've crossed off client management from your ideal career choices. So your entire career I'm assuming, has been client facing. So was it from the beginning that you didn't like client specific roles, or now that you work for iHeart and then now you're at Google, you have developed a sense that now you don't like to work for specific clients, or what caused you to dislike such roles?
Yeah, so I should clarify, right? You always have a client.
Yeah.
It could be external, it could be internal. What I meant by the client management was working at a media agency. I had external clients, advertisers, right, that I needed to manage. And that relationship, and many people like that and enjoy that. And I think it's great. Like if you work at sales, right, that's a big chunk of what you do, right? It wasn't for me. I didn't enjoy that at all. Just clients just stressed me out. I do work now with internal clients, right? Because I do serve. I don't really serve them, but I'm their partner. I'm their business partner, right? I support the leadership team of this partnership team at Google, the global business development team. And when they come to me with a request, right, they are my clients. But the relationship there is different because we're aligned on the same goals. We work for the same company. We have a different relationship versus working with an external client where your goals aren't always aligned, right? So in a media agency, my goal, for example, was to get them to spend more money on their media campaign. Their goal is probably the opposite. It's probably, how can I spend less and get more, as well as other concerns that they might have, right? And that creates a conflict from the start. And so after the role in the media agency, and as I started working at iHeart, it was very clear to me that I like being someone's, call it whatever, you can call it business partner or chief of staff. There are many names to their internal consulting. Like that I really, really enjoyed, really supporting someone and being their go-to person in making really big decisions and thinking through problems. We at Google, at Google, there are many, many people and many teams that do similar work to what I do, but support different teams. And so we have sort of this motto, like that we're champions and challengers, right? That is our goal. Like we work with our stakeholders and our internal clients to help promote whatever ideas or plans that they have. That's the champion role, right? But we're also their challengers because we need to tell them if their idea is not going to work. And we need to help them make it better, right? And I love that. Like that is one of the best parts of my job, I feel.
That's good. Thank you for answering.
Leerone,
Yeah.
If any of the attendees do think of additional questions that they want to follow up with you, would it be best for them to reach out you on your LinkedIn account?
Yes, and yes, that's a very good reminder. Yes, as I said before, right, I like helping students figure it out. I think that's really, really important. So definitely reach out on LinkedIn. Also, and this is, I think, just in general, like if you reach out to me or anyone else that you meet in some sort of forum or capacity, right, always good to write like, hey, we met when X, right? We met at the ODI thing, just so that gives me some context, right? So yes, definitely find me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions that any of you have. Yes.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, we are at our allotted time. So I want to thank all of you for spending some time with us on Monday. We can't do one day immersion without your support. And if you have more questions about how to be involved, like Leerone was saying in the beginning, ideas about speakers, different topics, send them to Dolly at onedayimmersion.com, and I will share them with the team and we'll make things happen because this is all about you. Honestly, this is about you. We want to help, getting these people in front of you. We want to help sharing their stories. This is kind of their masterclass story. We can't do it without you, but we certainly do it for you. We have our next session, which is on the end of the month with a producer. So I have your emails. If you don't mind me sending out that information to you, I'm happy to do it. But in the meantime, I want to thank Leerone for sharing her story. I learned a lot about her that I didn't know, even though I've known her for a while. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you took away some things to think about. On some of her career advice. I think it's really smart. But keep your heads up, guys. It's a tough time, but we're going to get through this. We will. We always do. We always seem to come out stronger. It looks ugly right now, but we are. We're together in this, and it's going to be okay. So thanks again for your support. Let me know if you need anything. Dolly@OneDayEmergent.com. Leerone, thank you for everything. And you guys be safe, take care, be well, okay?